They told her the paint was harmless. They told her to put the brush between her lips, to shape a finer point hundreds of times a day. What they didn't tell her was that every time she did, she was swallowing something that would dissolve her from the inside out. And the men who ran the company already knew. This is the story of the most profitable glow in America, and the company that let its own workers die to protect it. In 1917, radium was magic. Discovered less than 20 years earlier, it glowed in the dark, with no battery, no flame, a cold, endless green light that seemed to defy nature itself. People drank it for their health, rubbed it on their skin, paid a fortune to feel its energy. And in a factory in New Jersey, the United States Radium Corporation had found the perfect use for it, painting the numbers on watch dials so soldiers and workers could read the time in the dark. They called the paint Undark, and to apply it, they hired young women, hundreds of them. These were some of the best-paid working women in America. The job felt glamorous. The paint left a shimmer on their hair, their dresses, their teeth. Some of them painted their nails with it for a night out. They'd smile in the dark and glow. They were told the paint was so safe you could eat it. The technique they were taught had a name: lip, dip, paint. Point the brush with your lips, dip it in the radium, paint the dial, again and again and again, hundreds of times a day, every day. It started with a toothache. One of the women, her name was Molly, went to the dentist for a sore tooth. The dentist pulled it, but the socket wouldn't heal. It just stayed open, weeping. When he reached in to examine it, part of her jawbone came away in his fingers. Doctors had never seen anything like it. They gave it a name that would haunt the factory for years: Radium Jaw. One by one, the women began to fall. Aching bones, teeth falling out, anemia so severe they could barely stand, legs that shortened as the bone crumbled, tumors blooming where the radium had settled, because radium, it turned out, behaves almost exactly like calcium. Their own bodies had mistaken it for the mineral that builds bone, and so they'd stored it in their teeth, their jaws, their spines, where it sat silently, firing radiation into them from the inside 24 hours a day for the rest of their shortened lives. They were, quite literally, glowing in their graves. Here's the part the company didn't want you to know. The scientists and executives at US Radium understood exactly how dangerous radium was. The men who handled it in the lab used lead shields, ivory-tipped tongs, masks. They knew that direct contact could burn, poison, and kill. And yet the women a few rooms away, the women being told to put it in their mouths, were given nothing. No warning, no protection, nothing but a brush and a quota. When the women began to sicken, the company didn't help them. It protected itself. It funded its own medical examinations, then buried the results. Reports that pointed to radium were quietly shelved. Company-friendly doctors told the women their problems were something else entirely. In some cases, they spread the rumor that the women were suffering from syphilis, a diagnosis designed not to heal them, but to shame them into silence. To make sure no one would believe a dying factory girl over a respectable corporation. One executive, when asked about the deaths, is said to have shrugged them off. The women were dying, and the paint was still selling. But one of them refused to disappear quietly. Her name was Grace Fryer. By the time she decided to fight, radium had already begun to destroy her spine and jaw. She had to wear a back brace just to sit upright. It took her 2 years just to find a lawyer willing to take on US Radium. When she finally did, 5 dying women walked into a courtroom to face one of the most powerful corporations in the country. The press called them the Radium Girls. They were so weakened that some of them couldn't raise their arms to take the oath. Doctors testified they had only months to live. The company's strategy was simple and cruel: delay. Drag the case out with postponement after postponement and wait for the women to die before they ever had to pay. But the women's suffering became a national scandal. The public was horrified, and in 1928, cornered by the outrage, US Radium settled. Each woman received a payment, money for medical care, and a pension for the years they had left. Years that, for most of them, could be counted on one hand. It was not justice, not really, but it was something almost no worker had ever won before. A corporation forced to admit that it owed something to the people it had used up. The Radium Girls did not just fight for themselves. Their case helped establish something we now take for granted: that a company can be held responsible for the harm it knowingly does to its workers. Their suffering rewrote labor law. It shaped the safety standards that protect people in dangerous jobs to this day. And there's one last detail that never lets this story go. Radium has a half-life of over 1,600 years, which means the radium those women swallowed is still inside them, still active, still glowing, in their bones, in their graves, right now. If you opened those coffins tonight, in the total dark, they would still shine. Because behind every fortune, there's a ledger, and some of them are written in blood. This channel exists to open those ledgers, one at a time. If you want to see the next one, subscribe. The next story is already darker.